So for our coloring, we are going to pull our watercolors up close to us. Actually, before we start coloring in with our watercolors, you guys have done this all in pencil. So I recommend that you take a Sharpie or a permanent marker and you outline all of those pencil lines that you just created. Please do erase those lines that you no longer need. So that's going to be the head that we have here on the inside of our snout, our neck, our ear, inside the horn. We don't want that. Any other lines that you accidentally made and that you need to erase. Anything that comes inside of your lines that you don't want, go ahead and erase everything that you need to erase, and then when you're done, you're going to outline and trace over all of those pencil lines. So now, if you need some time with your tracing, you can pause the video and continue on with that. But if you are done tracing, next we're going to get started on our watercolors. So I'm going to pull my watercolors closer to me. And what we're going to start on first is the body of our species. So whether you have an aquicorn or whatever other species you created, we are going to color that in now. Now, in the book, aquicorns were found in many different colors. In my sample, I created this pink, purplish aquicorn, so I'm going to continue on with that same color, but you can make your species or your aquicorn whatever color you want or that you have, okay? So I'm going to start with a very light red to create my pink. So if you have a palette like I do, I recommend mixing any colors or helping you manage your water using this palette. It's very helpful. So you can do that by adding some water to a section in your palette and then taking the color that you'd like to use. And this will help you create a good mixture of water and color and get a good ratio. So that way you don't have your watercolors too dark or too light. And you can test that out if you'd like. Okay, but once you have a color that you like, then you're just going to start painting in. Okay, so I'm going to keep mine very light because I want it to be like a pink color. And I'm just going to paint in my whole, give myself a nice wash around my whole aquicorn. So when you're adding a wash, basically that means you're making a very light base color. It's always important to start out light when you're working with watercolors because you can always go darker, but it is much harder to get lighter with your watercolors. So as you do your base color, if you start with the color that you maybe don't like, then you can always change it and fix it because your color and your layer should have been light enough. Now, any areas that you want to be white, if you're working on a white paper, then you would just not paint that in or work as lightly as possible. If you accidentally did paint in an area that you want to stay super, super light or even white, then usually having a very light layer like this, if you put a darker color next to that light area, then that contrast will help make it look as light as you'd like it to be. Now, any parts of your painting that you need to paint with a medium brush or a smaller brush, you can go ahead and switch your brushes as you feel you need to. That's what I'm going to be doing, but right now my large brush is just good enough. All right, so once you have a good light wash on your creature here, you like how it looks, then that's all you need to add for your wash later. Okay, but next what you're going to do is you're going to work on some shading. So you're going to be using the same color, and if you have a palette like me, you're just going to add a little bit more water to your palette, but then you're going to add more paint to your palette this time because you want it to be darker. So you can kind of test that out, and if it looks darker than your first color, then you're good to go. And so this time you're just going to find a side that you want to have a little bit more shadow, and you're just going to go along that side and make it just a little bit darker. So I recommend, since this is actually meant to be a thin shadow area, I recommend getting a small brush or medium-sized brush. Just going to follow my Aquicorn down the bottom side. And then as I come to the very end tip of my tail here, I'm going to make that a little bit darker because it is kind of coiling up to each other, and so it will get a lot of shadow from itself. Now anytime if you have a dark color next to a very light color and you want that to blend a little bit, you're just going to take a little bit of water, damp out as much water as you can from your brush, and you're just going to kind of pull that into your lighter color, and it will help blend that a little bit more. So you can kind of see I blended that out now and it doesn't look as harsh. So if you don't want your shadow to look too harsh, you can kind of do that along the side of the body as well. Be careful because if your shaded area has a lot of pigment, then you could potentially pull some of that dark area into your light area. But for the most part, it shouldn't be too bad. So you can see I'm kind of blending that out a little bit more. It's not as harsh. Alright, and once you've added some shadow into your species, then you can go ahead and you can add any other colors that you want. You can add details and color to your details and things like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add in some darker areas for these this back ear, these back wings, and this back foot. So if you have any areas on your creature that are kind of further back, then you kind of want to show that it has a different coloration. It's a little bit darker. So I'm going to use, since I have this pink, I'm going to take a little bit of red violet here. Make it a dark purplish color. And I'm going to make that just a little bit of a darker pink. Now once you have a color, and if you don't like it, again, always try and work lighter first. So I think it should be a little bit darker. I'm going to take a little bit of some purple and kind of add that in instead. I like how it mixed in with that red-violet, so I think I'm going to keep that combination. So do what works best for you and your creature. I'm going to do the same thing in the ear back here, and then this back leg. Okay, so once you have added in a little bit more shading and your details, then that is it for your Aquicorn. So I'm just going to go in and add just a little bit more details real quickly. If you are still working, you can definitely pause the video where you need more time. If you are already done with painting in your creature and adding in your shading and details, then you can go ahead and skip forward and move on to the next step. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a little bit more of this red violet and make it pretty dark. So use less water, more paint. And I'm going to go right along my details in the wings here. I'm going to make that a little bit darker. Now, keep in mind we are going to go back in with with color pencils and add even more detail and a little bit of shading. So if there's anything that you don't want to do with your watercolors because maybe the area is a little too small, then you can always wait to do that step in your color pencils. Alright, but once you have finished that up, then next what we're going to do is we are going to paint in our background because we're still painting. Alright. So now I'm going to start painting in the background, and so I have my ocean and my ground. I'm going to start with my ground first. I'm going to use my big brush, and I'm going to take this yellow orange. Again, you want to start with the wash, so washes are very light, so I'm going to get some yellow orange and make it nice and light. And I'm just going to go across my whole ground. Now, if you like that light look, then you can keep it super light. If you're not too big of a fan of the really, really light watercolors, then you can keep your base color light and then go back in with some other layers to add in some shading. You can create a gradient going from light to dark. Usually the very bottom of your ground would be dark, and then as you get higher, it's going to get lighter and lighter because it's getting further away. Okay, but once you have finished up with your ground, then you can go ahead and work on the details of your ground. So I'm going to get a smaller brush again this time. And I'm going to get some green. And I'm going to paint in these details that I have here for my coral reefs. I'm going to get some green. And again, you want to use less water if you want to make it dark, more water if you want to make it light. But water is what activates these watercolors. So you at least want to get a little bit of water on your brush. And then corals are usually seen in many, many different colors, even in real life, but also in the book that we're inspired by. So you can use any colors that you want. I think I'm going to go with an orange, an even darker orange. There we go. You're just going to paint in those details. Now these smaller details like the pebbles in our ground, if you would like to paint the bigger ones that you have in, you can definitely do that. But if you have some really, really small ones, then you can just color that in using your color pencils. All right, so now for the actual background, I'm going to teach you guys a technique for watercolors, and that technique is called wet into wet. So if you've used watercolors before, you may already know our wet into wet technique, but if you haven't used watercolors before, then you can go ahead and learn it now. All right, so what we do wet into wet is we just take a large brush and we start right away just with pure water. So I'm going to take some water and I'm going to add it to just one section at a time, especially if you have a big area. If you just try and add water to your whole background, that water is going to dry by the time you end up wanting to paint it. So you're just going to add it in one small area, and then you can use just one color, or you can use multiple colors, but you want to take your color, wet it up nicely, and you're just going to basically add it and blot it to your area of water that you just painted in. And then if you don't want just one color, you want multiple colors and have it nice and fun, you can take a second color and you can go in and blot in your second color, and then those two colors will mix really nicely together, and they'll blend really beautifully and create this really cool pattern. As you can see, it's kind of like spreading out, creating this really fun texture. Okay, so I'm just going to continue doing that for the rest of my background, and you guys can go ahead and do that as well. So you start out with pure water, take the first color, and then your second color. Try not to go in what you've already painted, but it's okay if you do. It happens. Now, if you have a lot of these white spots as you're kind of just blotting your paper and they're not really spreading into those white spots, you can just get pure water only on your brush, and you can just go right along those white spots and just tap it very lightly, and then the surrounding paint will just kind of fall into place along all of those little white spots that you tap. that will help kind of get it to connect a little bit more, especially in little areas. So pure water. And then if you don't want to just stick to 2 colors, you can even work with 3 colors or 4 colors. You can do as many colors as you want, but I do recommend sticking to colors that are similar. So colors that are next to each other on the color wheel are called analogous colors, and that is the colors that we usually want to use when we are using this technique. So I'm actually going to be painting over this detail that I added in the top in my ocean with the fish, because I'm going to have them look like they're super far away, so I'm not going to really add any detail or much color into them. So they're going to kind of fade into the background with this ocean color here. So you should begin to notice that your water usually only spreads where you put the water. So if you try your best to avoid that dry paint and only place the water in the empty areas, then your water will only spread in those empty areas. And you might just need to go up to the edges a little bit. And if it gets into your animal at all, that's okay, because it's swimming in the ocean, it has water all around it, so it's going to look like it's submerged a little bit more into the water than normal, and that's fine. So now I'm going to take my smaller brush, and I'm going to take some purple, just a little bit, and I'm going to kind of paint in these little fish that I added, just to make them look a little bit darker. So that way they can kind of look like they're further away and kind of fading into that background area. Okay. Now, you should be done or finishing up with your background. If you still need a little bit more time with that, you can definitely pause this video. But now that we have finished painting our